Good evening, and thank you for tuning in for this Rock and Roll News Channel special report. I'm Hugh E. Lewis, and this is the news. They're calling it the great band name Kidnapping Adventure of Jane Doe. Apparently, it all started on the Eve 6 of the last Black Sabbath Sunday, when a disturbed foreigner prince from Europe, known only as Mr. Chickenfoot, abducted a fair Iron Maiden, a Miss Jane Doe, as she sat on the Elton John leaving a Uriah Heep, full of corn in Kansas. Miss Doe was in hiding from the Wizard of Ozzy Osbourne with her little Snoop Dogg Toto, when the prince was to Chaka Khan her into his Joan jet and fly back to Chicago. During the flight, he reportedly called her a cheap trick Don Ho, then pulled down her ZZ Top and tried to kiss her pink bush lips with TLC. He reportedly had a bad case of the blue balls from letting his meatloaf, and persisted to violently death jam his Johnny Rotten Deep Purple tool into her smash mouth. Miss Doe resisted his advances, but this crazy town method man then tore off her Kenny G-string and stuffed his Eric Johnson into her Pink Floyd, succeeding to Iggy Pop her Buck Cherry. Immediately after the assault, Miss Doe realized she had contracted the Eric Clapton, and her pussycat doll now hoobastanked like Hootie and the Blowfish. When the aircraft landed, she escaped and began to run DMC until she Steppenwolf doo-doo left by a jackal in a puddle of mud. She then ran to the Nazareth Church and sought out a Judas priest to cleanse the poison from her soul asylum, even though she had faith no more. A choir of Beach Boys then escorted her 3 doors down to the men at work on the telephone lines, where they were to no doubt call the police and Dr. Dre on the Tommy Two-Tone phone.
Hello?
Within moments, a night ranger arrived, who was a juvenile sheriff, and was holding loaded LA guns to place this Alice in chains, before her infected hole created an epidemic of megadeth to the rest of America. Thankfully, her fairy godsmack mother, Good Charlotte, appeared in a mystical fog hat, and reportedly changed some smashing pumpkins and a rat into a horse and carriage, resembling the REO Speedwagon, which was driven by the Stone Temple Pilots, who were driving and crying. They began to head east and rush to the spin doctors at the hospital next to the firehouse for the cure before she became DOA. By mistake, they took her to a funeral home where the mortician had 9-inch nails. Reportedly, he had a knack for using his bad finger to cram her butthole surfers full of red hot chili peppers and vanilla ice. She reportedly felt better than Ezra, but less than Jake, as she narrowly escaped the morbid slayer in the Stevie Nicks of time, but was then immediately abducted in a Jefferson Starship by an alien ant farm led by Adam Ant.
Take us to your leader.
The extraterrestrials then probed her with a great white snake for 3 days' grace until she acquired Jane's addiction to a large banana rana.
Oh, yes.
After the intense probing, she had to rub her eyes and blink 182 when she saw the Pet Shop Boys releasing a shaggy white lion and a red deaf leopard that were pouncing to attack, causing her to get the screaming Cheetah Willies and wet her pants in fountains of wing. She reportedly got the flock of seagulls out of there, nearly escaping by the Leonard Skinner of her Thin Lizzy, by throwing a limp biscuit at the AC/DC machine head and creating static X in a Tesla radio head, which caused the crap to clash near the Billy Ocean. Eyewitnesses claim it fell in a huge ball of earth, wind, and fire, somewhere away down south in Dixie, chicks, near Creedence Clearwater Revival, just beyond the muddy waters of the Little River Band at Cypress Hill, Alabama.
Did you see that?
At the crash site, it was raining stray cats and 3 dog nights, and then began Van Halen, as she was rescued by a motley crew of talking heads from Asia. They nursed her back to health by feeding her a 11 spoonful of Glenn Campbell soup, black-eyed peas, and a modest mouse on bread. She reportedly said it tasted like garbage to her saliva, even with the ebony and ivory of salt and pepper, which cost her a Jethro Tull of 50 cents. She was breaking Benjamin with Johnny Cash to pay for the food at She Jimmy Eat World in Lincoln Park while listening to a group of monkeys playing with their meat puppets and putting on a live Pearl Jam in the Dream Theater. Miss Doe then apparently became MC Hammered on Seven Dust and other dope. She entered the mosh pit and began performing a switchfoot dance until she began hallucinating in living color and suddenly passed out.
Oh.
She was quickly incarcerated, dressed in white stripes, and made an audio slave, which caused her to see simply red, although she still had the moody blues and was now in dire straits.
Oh.
Her cellmates were a cult of Spice Girls who belonged to a James gang called the Beastie Boys, who were led by the Blues Brothers.
That's right.
Determined to escape, she used the last of her June Carter cash to buy some Guns N' Roses from a rival Kool in the Gang, the Ghetto Boys, who were led by the Jonas Brothers. She didn't purchase any roses, but did buy a .38 Special Velvet revolver and an Aerosmith & Wesson shotgun with Matchbox 20 Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet band.
Oh, yeah.
Her simple plan involved using a Metallica golden earring to unlock the cell doors and release the village people, who quickly turned the Electric Light Orchestra into a System of a Down, which put the jail into Depeche Mode. In the Richie Blackmore of the darkness, she slipped not into the parking lot to Steely Dan Alita Ford Fabulous Thunderbirds. The vehicle was full of diesel fuel and had Alice Cooper J-Lo profile tires with spinners. She took along some bad company of Boys to Men to protect her lighthouse as they were taking the fast way across the Grand Funk Railroad tracks. They were reportedly on their journey to Frankie Goes to Hollywood, but when arriving in John Denver, they saw an oasis of Crosby, Stills, and Nash on the side of the roadhouse, and commenced to drink April wine and a two-pack of Steve Miller beer. They drunkenly stumbled into a savage sound garden, picked some Herb Albert Robert plant, and rolled Doobie Brothers with Dan Zigzag papers. Then lit the Puff Daddy of Mary Jane Girls. She was a Weezer from the Smokey Robinson and suddenly began to feel stone sour about her recent encounters and began to cry blood, sweat, and tears for fears. She knew it was ludicrous, but there were too many temptations, and she wanted to share some nirvana by having extreme sex pistols with Marilyn Manson in the backseat of a stolen Chevelle.
Oh, yeah.
She made him put a Milli Vanilli flavored Red Ryder on his Tiny Tim Rod Stewart before she would accept his jewel into her perfect circle. He reportedly began the foreplay by Michael Jackson, the Kinks, out of his Peter, Gabriel. As she could see there, his little Wayne was actually a Mr. Big One, because he was now hung like a zebra.
Oh, my.
At first they were misfits, but he quickly guided his mushroom head into her faster pussycat to wham his Thompson twins deep into her Y&T for an in-sync solid Dokken of ecstasy. He reportedly penetrated slowly at first, but then sank like a Led Zeppelin as his Peter, Frampton, quickly made a tight seal of her heart-shaped box in a sublime climax until they made cream and were Brooks and Dunn. Miss Doe claimed it was Tony Orlando and Dawn when she awoke from REM's sleep, then proceeded to ask her lover boy for some Eddie money. But he was dead Kennedy's broke and only wanted to put his autograph on an IOU. She then demanded his Neil Diamond pinky ring and didn't even give him a nickel back. She reportedly flagged down a Fleetwood Mac truck that was Hall & Oates and hitched a ride to the Keith Urban part of Orleans to have her Destiny's Child delivered by Dr. Hook and the Cutting Crew. She prayed to Jesus Jones, ate M&Ms and John Bon Jovi's while counting crows in the delivery white room.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Once the ugly kid, Joe, was born, she called her mamas and papas, her brother Kane and Uncle Cracker, and said,
Guess who?
even without her parents' blessing, she was certain this newborn kid, Rock, was going to be a BB King, and she would make sure her little Billy Idol would soar with the eagles and never eat beetles, Papa Roaches, or cranberries. She was also determined not to let her little rascal flats become Marvin Gaye from playing with Lady Gaga's Goo Goo Dolls.
Don't be silly.
In a final note, remember, all you damn Yankees, this American hi-fi saga could happen to you too. I'm Hugh E. Lewis with the Rock and Roll News Channel, and this has been a special report.